At 5:03 in the morning, someone pounded on my front door hard enough to pull me out of sleep. For a few seconds, I thought something had happened in the building. A fire, a break-in, maybe an accident. When I opened the door, I found my neighbor standing there. His name was Victor. We weren't friends. We exchanged greetings, collected each other's packages when one of us was away, and occasionally complained about the elevator. That was the extent of our relationship. What struck me wasn't that he was awake, it was that he looked terrified. His face was pale. His hands shook slightly. "Don't go to work today," he said. I stared at him. "What? Just don't go." I waited for an explanation. None came. "Victor, what are you talking about?" He glanced down the hallway as if he expected someone to appear. Then he looked back at me. "You'll understand by noon." That was all, no explanation, no details, just fear. Then he walked away. I stood in my doorway for several seconds before closing it. Back in bed, sleep never returned. The logical part of my brain rejected the entire conversation. Adults didn't make predictions like that. Adults explain themselves. By 7 o'clock, I was getting ready for work anyway. Then I remembered his face, not dramatic, not theatrical, scared, genuinely scared. I sat on the edge of my bed with my car keys in my hand for nearly 20 minutes. Finally, against my better judgment, I called my supervisor and said I wasn't feeling well. The lie tasted stupid. After hanging up, I almost called back to undo it. Instead, I stayed home. The morning crawled. At 8, nothing happened. At 9, nothing happened. By 10, I was annoyed. I imagined Victor apologizing later for some misunderstanding. I imagined myself explaining to my boss why I had missed a shift because of a neighbor's strange warning. Every passing minute made me feel more foolish. By 11, I had nearly convinced myself that I had made a ridiculous decision. Then my phone rang 11:30. The caller ID displayed a police department number. For a moment, I thought it was spam. I answered anyway. The officer asked my name. Then he asked whether I was currently at home. My stomach tightened. There was a pause. "Can you confirm you did not report to work this morning?" I told him I hadn't. Another pause. Then he said words I still remember exactly. "That's fortunate." A man had entered our office building shortly after opening. Armed, the details were still unfolding, but several employees had been evacuated while officers secured the scene. No one knew the full story yet. The officer wasn't calling because I was a suspect. He was calling because multiple employees had identified me as someone who normally arrived early, someone who should have been there, someone who wasn't. When the call ended, I sat motionless in my kitchen. The apartment felt strangely quiet. Victor's words replayed in my head. "You'll understand by noon." I understood. What I didn't understand was how he knew. Hours later, after police activity began appearing on local news, I knocked on his door. He opened it immediately, almost like he had been expecting me. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then I asked the question, "How did you know?" His expression changed, not relief, not pride. Something closer to exhaustion. The story came out slowly. The previous evening, he had been walking his dog behind a row of businesses near our office complex. A man sitting alone in a parked vehicle caught his attention, not because he looked dangerous, because he looked desperate. Victor had overheard fragments of a phone conversation through an open window, angry references to employees, specific mentions of our company, threats, nothing concrete enough for police intervention at the time, but enough to leave him unsettled. He reported it anyway. An officer took the information. There wasn't much else to do. Then he spent the entire night wondering if he had misunderstood what he heard, until dawn, until fear finally outweighed embarrassment. So he came to my door, not because he knew something would happen, because he was afraid something might. "Why didn't you tell me all that?" I asked. He looked away. "Because if I was wrong, I'd sound insane." That answer stayed with me. Weeks later, investigations concluded. The situation ended without the mass tragedy many feared that morning. Life returned to something resembling normal. My job remained. My routines returned. The hallway remained the same. But every time I passed Victor's apartment, I remembered how close I came to ignoring him. There was no celebration, no dramatic friendship formed afterward. just a quiet understanding. Sometimes trust doesn't arrive wrapped in certainty. Sometimes it arrives before sunrise, wearing fear on its face, asking you to make a choice without enough information. And sometimes the hardest thing to explain is why someone cared enough to knock.